GDPR Basics. Topics to be covered. In this first module, we will look at the following topics. What is personal data? What is GDPR? How is GDPR relevant after Brexit? Key principles of data protection. Who is the supervisory authority? What are the aims of GDPR? Key GDPR terminology. Summary. Assessment. What is personal data? We define personal data as information that relates to an identified or identifiable living human. An identifiable person is one who can be identified directly or indirectly by numerous different types of information. They can be identified by unique data such as DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, fingerprints, information regarding their name and home address. The processing of personal data is covered in two ways. Firstly, personal data is processed wholly or partly in electronic form. We call this automated. Secondly, personal data is processed manually, such as in a filing system. We call this non-automated. In most cases, it will be simple to determine whether the information you process relates to an identified or identifiable living human. Sometimes it will be more difficult and you will need to consider the information you have to determine if it is personal data. Some personal data is more sensitive and requires more protection. The GDPR refers to this data as special categories of personal data. This data includes race, ethnicity, religious beliefs, health data, sexual orientation. Personal data also includes information relating to criminal offenses and convictions. This data also needs more protection. What is GDPR? The General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, is an EU privacy law. Its purpose is to protect the personal data and privacy for all individuals within the EU. The GDPR applies to each member state of the European Union to provide more consistent protection of consumer and personal data across EU member states. These regulations increase the restrictions on what organizations can do with your data. This also gives greater protection and rights to individuals over accessing and controlling their data. How is GDPR relevant after Brexit? After Brexit, the UK will still be required to comply with the GDPR. The reason for this is GDPR applies to all companies based in the EU. It also applies to those with EU citizens as customers. This will have an impact all over the world, as even international companies who have EU citizens as customers must comply with this. As there is such a high level of business involving the EU, GDPR will influence strong data protection procedures around the world. Because of this, GDPR will be incorporated into UK domestic law as part of any EU withdrawal and will continue to function alongside the Data Protection Act 2018. Once leaving the EU, the UK will be given third country status. This means the UK has to meet an adequacy status. They must demonstrate to the EU that the UK is a safe place to share and process data. In doing so, this will stop restrictions on data transfers being imposed.